I'm Elena Martinez, 34, a public school teacher. The ballroom at the Hill Ridge Country Club shimmered with chandeliers and quiet judgment. I stood just outside the grand double doors, my breath catching slightly from the early autumn air and nerves. Through the cracks between the panels, I could hear laughter polished, performative, the kind you hear at reunions where people measure success in titles and champagne flutes. A staff member in a black vest and red tie glanced at my name on the check-in list, then at the empty column next to it. "Sorry," he said, not unkindly. "It looks like you weren't registered as a primary guest. You're just marked as +1 under Mr. Ramon Martinez." He was reading my father's name. Of course. I gave a tight smile. "I'm his daughter." The man's eyebrows raised, trying to hide confusion. "You can wait in the lounge area until your father arrives, if you like. But the main room's only open for primary invitees until after the mayor's speech." Behind him, the frosted glass doors were opening and closing like a curtain of privilege. Through one of the gaps, I caught a glimpse of my dad's sharp gray suit, hair slicked back, laughing with a group of old-school friends. I stood there in my navy dress, holding the small wrapped box I brought as a thank you gift for his retirement award. A pen case with his initials carved on mahogany. My hands felt heavy. I stepped aside. The lounge area smelled of lemon oil and status. A bowl of unwrapped mint sat next to the leather armchair I settled into. I folded the gift neatly in my lap, back straight, just waiting, like the girl at the school dance who wasn't picked. From across the room, I saw Mrs. Halpern, the mayor's aide, peek in with her tablet and stop when she saw me. "Oh my God." "Elena," she said, crossing the room in her heels, "I didn't see you on the list." "You're here for the presentation." "Right." I nodded. "Just here as my dad's guest. Apparently." She frowned. "No. No, you're the one, hang on." She tapped rapidly, eyes widening as she read the screen. Then she looked up, glowing. "You're the honoree. Come with me." I barely had time to react. She grabbed my hand and whisked me through the side entrance into the ballroom. The lighting hit me like a spotlight. Conversations paused. People turned. My father, mid-laugh, froze as he saw me being led straight to the mayor's podium. The mayor adjusted his mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight is not just about those who built legacies, but also about those shaping our future. One of our community heroes couldn't even get through the front door properly tonight because her name was lost behind someone else's shadow. Let's fix that right now." He looked at me. "Elena Martinez, elementary school teacher, literacy advocate, and founder of the city's free tutoring network. Come receive your medal." The room went dead silent, forks in midair. My father's mouth parted. I walked forward with the weight of silence at my back, the gift box still pressed against my palm like an anchor. The medal gleamed under the lights. If you've ever stood at the edge of a room full of people who didn't see you until someone powerful made them look, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. I know that ache. Like and subscribe if you've ever been written off by your own family, only to prove them wrong when it mattered most. I didn't look at my father as I took the medal. I didn't need to. His silence said everything. After the applause faded, after the mayor shook my hand and the flash of the event photographer's camera disappeared from my eyes, I stood on the side of the stage, still holding the box I'd meant to give to my father. It felt like a souvenir from another version of the night one where I had slipped in quietly, clapped politely, and gone home unnoticed. But that story had been interrupted. My father didn't come up to me immediately. Instead, he lingered by the punch bowl, surrounded by his friends. They were whispering now. The same men who had once called me Ramon's quiet kid and asked if I was still playing with glue sticks at that school. The only one who approached was Mrs. Halpern. That was long overdue. she said, adjusting her ID badge. You changed hundreds of kids' lives. Elena, some of them wrote to the mayor's office themselves. I blinked. They did. She smiled. We've had teachers win awards before, but what you did setting up night reading programs, fundraising to buy books when your district cut the budget, that's different. That's legacy. The word startled me. Legacy. It was a word I had always heard tossed around at these reunions, but never in relation to me. I was the one who changed clothes in the car after work. The one who came to dinner still smelling faintly of expo marker and cafeteria lunch trays. And now, here I was, standing in the same room with the same people, only the air had shifted. Eventually, my father made his way over. He looked older under the lights, or maybe just quieter. I didn't know. He said. I nodded. No one did. He scratched behind his ear like he always did when he was trying to say something complicated but didn't have the language for it. You're just so low-key about things. I'm not hiding anything, I said. You just weren't looking. He glanced at the medal hanging from the red ribbon around my neck. That's a real honor. I held up the small gift box. This was for you. Retirement congratulations. He took it and opened it slowly. It's beautiful. For a second. We stood in the same silence that used to stretch between us during my teenage years. The silence of mismatched expectations. He had always wanted a child who would chase power, not meaning. I chased children who needed someone to believe they could read at grade level. That gap never really closed. Want to sit for a minute, he asked. We moved to a table near the edge of the room. He cleared his throat. When people asked what you did, I never knew how to make it sound impressive. I tilted my head. Why did it need to sound impressive? He stared down at his hands. Because they were all talking about their kids, the lawyers, the consultants, the ones making 6 figures. And I'd say, my daughter teaches first grade. And they'd nod politely and move on. I guess I felt like I had to compete. There it was. The old fear of not measuring up, passed down like family silver. I didn't ask you to compete. I said, I just wanted you to ask me how my week went. Maybe visit the classroom. He let out a slow exhale. You're right. I don't think I ever understood what it meant to be a good teacher. I saw it as something people did before they figured out what they really wanted to do. That's the thing. I said, I always wanted this. He nodded again. Not in agreement, but in recognition. We stayed at the table for a while. The room began to thin out. Laughter moving toward the bar and dessert table. I noticed someone walking toward us, a tall woman in a dark green dress. I recognized her as the mother of one of my students. Amina. Miss Martinez. She said warmly. I heard your name and had to come over. I'm Amina's mom. My father straightened slightly. She still reads every night, the woman said. And when I couldn't afford summer camp, your team got her into that literacy workshop. That changed everything. She wants to be a writer now. I smiled, heart swelling. She's got such a brilliant imagination. The mother touched my arm. We're so lucky she had you. She left as quickly as she arrived, her heels clicking across the polished floor. I turned to look at my father. His eyes followed her, then rested back on me. That's what you've been doing, he said softly. That's what I've been doing. I confirmed. He looked down, then said it so quietly I almost missed it. I'm proud of you. It didn't land with a swell of music. There was no slow-motion montage of healing. It was just a sentence. But it opened something between us. I stood up. I think I'm ready to go. The medal's nice, but I have early duty tomorrow. He laughed. Back to the real world. As we walked toward the exit, I noticed that some of the people who hadn't spoken to me all evening were now nodding in acknowledgement. One even said, "Hey, you're the teacher." Right, with the tone of someone discovering gold in their backyard. I didn't need to explain. I just smiled and kept walking. At the valet, my dad hesitated. "You driving?" "Yeah." "You, I was gonna call a car. You mind dropping me off?" That small request meant something. Not a grand gesture. Just the quiet recognition that we were no longer pretending I was just a teacher. I was someone who carried meaning not in titles, but in the lives I touched. He got in the passenger seat and didn't say anything for the first few blocks. Then he asked, "Do the kids know you got this award?" I shook my head. "Not yet." He looked out the window, then said, "You should tell them." I smiled. "Maybe I will." We stopped at a red light. The city around us hummed with late-night motion. I glanced at the medal in the cup holder. It reflected the dashboard lights. A small reminder that validation sometimes arrives late, but it does arrive. And sometimes, it brings your father back with it. Monday morning arrived with its usual chaos, sneakers squeaking on linoleum floors, pencil shavings clinging to sweaters, the unmistakable smell of cafeteria toast drifting through the halls. I walked into my classroom at 6:58 a.m., still wearing my old windbreaker and the faint memory of Friday night's spotlight. The medal lay tucked in the back pocket of my work bag. I hadn't planned on showing it off, but something my father said on the drive home echoed louder than I expected. "You should tell them." I didn't know if he meant the students, the staff, or maybe even myself. Miss Martinez Isaiah called, already sitting at his desk and doodling flames on the corner of his folder. "I brought my library book back early so I can get the new Captain Firestorm." "Nice," I said, holding out a high five. "You're climbing those reading levels like Spider-Man on caffeine." He grinned. "That's a lot of energy." Exactly my point. By the time the bell rang, all 24 of my kids were seated and buzzing. Mondays were usually the hardest, but something about the weekend had changed me. I felt a little more upright, like my spine had grown roots. I waited until they quieted down from the morning chatter. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out the small case. "I want to tell you all something," I said, walking to the front. "Something that happened to me this weekend." Their eyes widened. There was a thrill in hearing your teacher talk about her own life. I opened the case and held up the medal. "What's that?" asked Kayla, her eyes big. "This is a medal," I said. "It's something the mayor gave me." "You met the mayor?" Isaiah exclaimed, half rising out of his seat. I laughed. "Yes, but the medal wasn't for meeting her. It was for the reading programs we've built, for the fact that you all keep showing up, working hard, and reading every day." I didn't do that alone. There was a pause. Then, surprisingly, quiet clapping from the back row, followed by more, then all of them. The sound was uneven and honest, like a campfire crackling. "Can I hold it?" asked Lucy. I nodded and passed it carefully. It went hand to hand, each child whispering something like it was a sacred object. I'd never seen them so reverent. After class, Mrs. Daniels, the assistant principal, stepped in. She saw the medal on my desk and raised her eyebrows. "Elena," she said, walking over. "You didn't tell me you were receiving a civic honor. That's major." I didn't expect it either. "Well," she said, crossing her arms with a smirk, "I hope you're ready for a staff meeting full of envious admiration or confusion. You know how we get?" I smiled. I'm used to it. But the meeting later that day wasn't what I feared. There were no snide remarks or passive-aggressive questions. Just quiet congratulations. A few nods from teachers who never spoke to me before. One of the new hires even asked to shadow my after-school reading club. By the end of the week, something strange began to happen. Kids I didn't even teach started showing up outside my door. "Are you the teacher that got the medal?" one fifth grader asked, arms crossed like he didn't believe the rumors. "I am. Can I sit in your room during lunch?" My classroom's kinda loud, so I said yes. And then came another. And another. It got to the point where I started keeping extra copies of worksheets and leftover granola bars in my desk drawer. These weren't just readers, they were seekers. Looking for space, safety, someone who saw them. One afternoon, just as the dismissal bell rang, my phone buzzed. A text from my dad: "Dinner at Las Palmas tonight. My treat. Want to hear more about your school?" I stared at the screen for a moment, caught off guard by how casual it was, like this had always been normal between us. I replied, "7 works. See you there." Las Palmas was one of those places he loved. White tablecloths, dim lighting, leather-bound menus. When I arrived, he was already seated, a glass of water sweating beside his folded napkin. "You look good," he said. "Tired, but in a good way." "Teacher tired," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. "I've been thinking a lot," he began, fiddling with the edge of the bread basket. "About what you said? About how I wasn't really paying attention." I didn't say anything. I let the space open. "I think," he continued, "it was easier to just focus on things I understood. Titles, numbers, promotions. I didn't know how to value something like impact." He looked at me then, the way someone looks at a painting they'd ignored until the light hit it right. "I'm trying to learn." That hit me harder than any apology could have, because it meant he wasn't trying to fix the past. He was choosing to be different now. "I appreciate that," I said quietly. The waiter came by and took our orders, giving us a few moments to sit in the kind of silence that didn't ache anymore. Over grilled vegetables and chicken mole, we talked about school. I told him stories about students without names, of course the ones who came in afraid to speak and left quoting poetry. He asked about lesson planning, curriculum changes, what kept me up at night. For the first time, he didn't just ask what I did. He asked why I did it. "I wanted to build a place I would have needed as a kid," I said at one point. "I wanted to be the adult who didn't flinch when someone couldn't read, who didn't treat struggle like failure." He nodded, pushing a piece of tortilla around his plate. "You were always good at seeing people. I was just too busy trying to get seen." We left the restaurant 2 hours later, full of food and something softer. He walked me to my car. As I opened the door, he said, "You know, I told my golf group about the medal." I raised my eyebrows, even brought a printout of the photo. They didn't believe it at first. I laughed. "Well, I suppose they believe it now." He shrugged. "They better? My daughter's not just a teacher." There was a quiet in the parking lot, the kind that hangs like mist when the truth has been spoken. I didn't correct him. I didn't say "I am just a teacher," because there was nothing just about it anymore. It was everything. By the end of the month, my classroom had unofficially become the second heart of the school. Kids from other grades started trickling in during lunch or dismissal, not to cause trouble, just to be. They'd lean against bookshelves, pretend to look through the graphic novels, ask quiet questions like, "Do you have any more of those animal flashcards, or can I help you clean the whiteboard?" There was an energy now, something tender and invisible, a kind of gravitational pull. I didn't advertise it. I didn't make it official. I just let the door stay open. One Friday, Mrs. Daniels knocked during my planning period. She peeked her head in with a different tone than usual. "Elena," she said, "I just had a meeting with the district office." I looked up from grading. "Everything okay?" She walked in, holding a manila folder. "Better than okay. They want to pilot a new cross-district mentorship program. You'd work with first-year teachers in low literacy zones. They'd come observe, shadow you, learn from your strategies. It would be part-time, just a few days a month. I blinked. Wait. Why me? She handed me the folder, because they saw the numbers, and because your name keeps showing up. In parent letters, in student comments, in that mayor's medal coverage. I held the folder but didn't open it right away. Would I still teach full-time? Yes. But you'd have some flexibility. They'll compensate your hours. It's a recognition role, not a replacement. I smiled, unsure whether to feel overwhelmed or grateful. I'll think about it. She nodded, then paused. You know, Elena, you're a leader, whether you realize it or not. Her voice was gentle, not performative, not hollow praise, just a fact. One she didn't expect me to argue with. Later that night, I sat at my small kitchen table, the folder unopened in front of me. The kitchen light flickered in that annoying way it always did, casting a warm hum across the worn tile. I finally lifted the flap and read the cover letter. It listed the metrics I'd almost forgotten. I'd achieved 97% increase in reading scores among English language learners, 3 successful literacy grants written, 23 family reading nights hosted. It all looked real, like someone had been watching even when I thought I was invisible. I texted my dad a photo of the letter. He replied with a string of exclamation points, followed by, "That's my girl." For a moment, I just stared at those words. There had been a time, not long ago, when "that's my girl" would have sounded hollow. Now it held something close to weight, not pride in ownership, but in understanding. 2 weeks later, I accepted the position. It didn't change my classroom. I still showed up at 6:50 a.m., still wiped marker ink off my sleeves, still read Charlotte's Web aloud with a dramatic voice, but every so often, a new face would sit in the back, a quiet observer, a young teacher, fresh from certification, wide-eyed and hopeful. One in particular stood out. Her name was Layla. She had nervous energy, the kind that couldn't quite sit still. "I'm not sure I'm cut out for this," she told me during one of our post-lesson debriefs. "Half the time I feel like I'm drowning." I smiled gently. That feeling never fully goes away. You just learn to swim through it. She laughed, then looked serious again. "But the way your students look at you, it's like they trust you without even needing proof." I paused. "You earn that one quiet moment at a time. It's not something you can force. You just keep showing up. And when they see that, they start to believe." She nodded, writing it down in her notebook like it was gospel. Later, as I cleaned up the reading nook, I thought about how strange it was how far things had shifted. I had once sat in that very position, wondering if anyone would ever call what I did important. Wondering if I was wasting my energy in a job that didn't make headlines or build empires. And now, young teachers were taking notes from me. One afternoon, my dad called while I was reorganizing the class library. "Hey," he said, "do you remember Mr. Feldman? My old college roommate?" I laughed. "The one who used to bring you cigars from Argentina." "That's him. He's on the board for the state's Public Education Advisory Council. I told him about what you're doing. He wants to meet you. Dad. No pressure. Just lunch. But, Elena, people are noticing. The kind of noticing that matters." I sat down on the beanbag chair in the corner, surrounded by piles of picture books. "It's funny. I never planned for this." He hesitated. "But you earned it." I felt that deeply. We talked a bit longer about the council, about maybe applying for a community education grant, about how he'd printed out every article mentioning me and put them in a binder. It was surreal. As I hung up, a small voice called from the hallway, "Miss Martinez." It was Lucy, holding a crumpled note. "Can I give you something?" I smiled and opened the note. It read, "Dear Miss Martinez, I didn't know reading could make me feel safe. Thank you for giving me a place to be smart." From Lucy. I looked up. Heart full. "Come here." She ran into my arms like it was the most normal thing in the world, and maybe it was. Later that week, I finally visited my parents' house again. The last time I'd been there, my name hadn't come up in conversation unless it was about helping carry boxes or organizing leftovers. But now, my medal hung in a frame on the hallway wall next to my dad's university diploma. "You okay with that?" he asked, watching me notice it. I nodded. "I am good, because I tell everyone about it." That night, after dinner, as we packed up the plates, my mom said, "You always knew who you were, didn't you?" I thought for a moment, then answered truthfully, "I knew who I wanted to be. The rest took time." The next morning, as I walked into my classroom and switched on the lights, I paused by the door and looked at the little sign above it, "Ms. Martinez, Room 104, where readers are made." It wasn't flashy, it wasn't formal, but it was mine. And somehow, after everything, that was enough. Spring brought more than just sunlight through the classroom blinds. It brought a quiet kind of recognition that felt truer than applause. My students had begun writing letters unprompted, taped to the cabinets, tucked into my desk drawers, slipped into my coat pockets. One simply read, "Miss Martinez, you make the world less scary." I kept that one in my wallet. The hallway outside my door had turned into a rotating gallery of children's drawings. One morning, I spotted a crayon portrait of me with a gold circle around my neck and the word "hero" written in crooked capital letters above my head. I didn't take it down. And yet, despite all the warm attention, I still struggled with one thing standing in the spotlight when it wasn't just for my kids. The State Education Council asked me to speak at a regional teacher symposium in early May. I tried to say no, but my dad, now my unofficial press agent, convinced me otherwise. "Elena, this isn't about showing off," he said. "It's about making sure your kind of work gets seen." So, I said yes. The event was held in a massive auditorium at a downtown university. The room buzzed with name tags, lanyards, and tightly scheduled panels. My talk was slotted right after a presentation titled "Data-Driven Metrics in Hybrid Learning Environments." I almost laughed. Nothing about my story involved buzzwords or trend graphs. Backstage, I held my note cards in one hand and a water bottle in the other. My palms were sweating. I kept thinking, what am I doing here? I'm not a researcher. I just teach. But then I saw someone walking toward me, Layla, the young teacher who'd shadowed me. "I came early to hear you speak," she said, beaming. I told 2 other teachers from my cohort to come too. That grounded me. Not fame, not flattery, but knowing that someone had come because of what I'd done with my chalk-stained hands and exhausted voice. I stepped up to the podium. The lights were harsh, but the silence was kind. I looked down at the first note card, then back up. "I'm Elena Martinez," I began, "and I teach first grade." There was something beautiful about saying it simply. With no apology, I don't have a research study to present. I didn't invent a new curriculum. But I've spent the last decade sitting across from kids who didn't know if they could learn, and staying long enough to prove they could. The room quieted further, in that deep way where even air feels still. I started a literacy program because I was tired of watching 7-year-olds carry failure like it was already theirs. I fundraised for books because our shelves were empty. I hosted family reading nights because I wanted parents to hear their kids say, "I can read this now." I paused, swallowed, continued. This work doesn't happen in headlines. It happens in whispers. It happens in the moment a child realizes they're not stupid, they're just scared. When I stepped off stage, there wasn't thunderous applause, just something quieter and more lasting, a few people waiting for me at the edge of the platform, wanting to ask questions, wanting to know how they could do the same. That evening, I called my dad. How was it? He asked immediately. It felt right. I said, I wish I could have been there. I think. I said slowly. You already were. We didn't need to explain it. There was a new language between us now, no longer coded in disappointment or pressure. Just presence. As the school year came to a close, my classroom filled with goodbye gifts and glitter cards. But one envelope stood out. It was plain white, with a child's uneven handwriting to Ms. Martinez. Please open when alone. Inside was a letter from Isaiah, the same kid who once threw tantrums when asked to read out loud. It said, Miss Martinez, I didn't like school before you. I didn't like myself either. But now I want to be a teacher like you one day. I want to help scared kids like you helped me. You made me believe I'm not broken. I'm just learning. I love reading now. I love who I am. Your friend. Isaiah. I put the letter down and wept at my desk, not from sadness, not even from pride, but from the quiet relief of knowing that all the invisible work, all the nights of exhaustion and self-doubt, meant something. The following week, on the last day of school, my father showed up unannounced. He was holding a cardboard box of books, some new, some clearly used, all gently labeled in his careful handwriting, Level A, E, Phonics Set, Bilingual Readers, Beginner Graphic Novels. I asked around the retirement center. He said, a lot of us had books we didn't need anymore. Thought you might want them for the lending library. I looked at him, stunned. You're starting a collection now, I teased. He shrugged. I figured it was time I did something useful. I let him set the box down inside. The kids will love this, I said. Then he looked around the room, slowly, thoughtfully. This is where it happens, he murmured. It's not much, I replied, but it's ours. No, he said firmly. It's everything. The final bell rang. The kids came pouring in, one last time, hugging, shouting, asking for photos, leaving behind pieces of themselves in the desks and the dust. My dad stood back, watching. When Isaiah ran up to him and said, Are you Miss Martinez's dad? He grinned with pride and said, That's me. There was no fanfare, no final speech, just goodbyes and gratitude. Later, after the last child left and the halls emptied out, I sat in the quiet, medal still tucked in the drawer behind my lesson plans. My dad sat beside me, both of us watching the sun crawl across the floor tiles. He broke the silence first. You know, I used to think just a teacher meant someone who couldn't do more. I glanced at him. Now I know, he said. It means someone who already is more. I didn't reply. I just reached into the drawer, took out the medal, and placed it on the desk between us. Not as a trophy, but as a symbol of every unseen victory, of every voice reclaimed, of every quiet, permanent change we never needed applause for.